Every effect requires a cause. Welcome to my YouTube channel, guys. Thank you for dropping in. If you haven't already, press the subscribe button down below and click the bell so you get notifications for new content. I wanted to troll some atheists today, and this is odd for me. I don't get to do this very often. I haven't done it in years, probably. I don't think I had my last debate with an atheist for at least, maybe it was 2 years now. Where Trey Jadlow and I debated two guys from the Kansas City Atheist Coalition at Emmanuel Baptist Church. That was fun. I enjoyed it, and I really haven't interacted with atheists much since. I got to a place where, to be completely honest, I just haven't seen the benefit of interacting with atheists, and and part of that is because I do not recognize or see any sort of strength or tenability in their position whatsoever. And honestly, it's kind of like a dying thing, like this whole idea of skepticism, with the whole advent of the intellectual dark web and these guys trying to ground values, conservative values. They're not Christians, it's like Stefan Molyneux, Jordan Peterson, and all these guys are trying to ground objective values in something else, something that's not just purely empirical, something that's not purely scientific. And yes, you have Sam, what's-his-face, who tries to ground morality or ethics in biology. Whatever. Anyway, so I haven't engaged in this conversation in a long time. I'm a little rusty, so I'll admit that. If I mess up, show a little grace, atheists. But I want to get on Rational Wiki and look at one of their descriptions of the cosmological argument. So if you get on Rational Wiki, which I don't advise anyone to do, but if you stumble upon there at some point in time when you're meaninglessly browsing the internet at work when you should be doing your job, if you search up apologetics, they give, 7 arguments. They give 7 arguments. Or at least list 7 arguments that Christians often use to prove or give evidence for the existence of God. And proof and evidence, by the way, that's not the same thing. So, but these arguments are either inductive or deductive. They're either arguing for rational certainty or they're arguing for probability. In the case of, a lot of William Lane Craig's stuff, for example, it's inductive. It's a lot of arguing for probability, not rational certainty. I would much rather argue for rational certainty, so using Thomas's proofs, 5 proofs, for example, I think get you there. So one of the things that I found was interesting, they describe several arguments. 2 of them is the cosmological argument, the ontological argument, both of which are arguments that I've dabbled in and appreciate and love and have used. The cosmological argument, for them, this is coming from Rational Wiki. The cosmological argument, or argument from first cause, claims that everything that exists has a cause, and since the universe exists, it must have a cause which exists outside the universe. Well, let's stop right there. The argument is not that everything that exists has a cause. That's not the argument. The principle of causality that the argument is based off of is that every effect requires a cause. Okay, so to try to require something from the argument that it itself does not claim to try and prove or give evidence for is to basically straw man the argument. You're not steel manning, you're straw manning. Okay, so at least represent the argument rightly, guys. Come on, are atheists capable of doing that? I'm not sure. I haven't run into too many atheists that represent Christianity or its argumentation for the existence of God very accurately. Now, in all fairness to them, most of the time that's because American evangelicalism has done a terrible job intellectually in setting these things forth, if they've set them forth at all. So the blame doesn't fall entirely upon the atheist for that. So the cosmological argument, or argument from first cause, claims that everything that exists has a cause, and since the universe exists, it must have a cause which exists outside the universe, meaning the Christian God. Well, no, this argument doesn't claim to prove the Christian God in all of its doctrinal detail. Okay, it's just an argument for what we call God. Okay, the first cause, the prime mover, whatever. The second sentence is even better. The question of why God does not need a cause inevitably leads to special pleading. Well, no, it doesn't, because God doesn't need a cause because he's not in effect. And if you say, well, there's no reason to think that, okay, well, let's just play along and say, okay, God is in effect, and so then that means there was a cause before him, right? And so we'll stop calling the effect God, and we'll start calling the first cause God. You stop calling the effect God, start calling the first cause God, right? The first cause is, God is just what we call the first cause, right? The prime mover. That is what we call God. That's why Thomas ends a lot of his argumentation with, and this prime mover, and this first cause is what we call God. So it's not question begging, because it's following the principle of causality. Now, you can take issue with the principle of causality, but again, that's taking issue with the principle or the law of causality. That's not taking issue with the cosmological argument. So is your complaint against the principle of causality, or is it being lodged against the cosmological argument? Make the distinction and define your terms. The question of why God does not need a cause inevitably leads to special pleading. No, it doesn't. Often by restating the argument in terms of things that begin to exist and defining their God to be eternal. Well, yes and no. Okay. It's not just definitional. They try to do this with the ontological argument as well. We're not taking a term God and then arbitrarily defining it, right? We're making a rational deduction, and that conclusion, the conclusion that we come to as a result of the deduction, that's what we call God. Okay, so this is a necessary argument, and the conclusion follows necessarily from the premises. Now, if you take it and simplify it and water it down in its simplest form, you get something like, well, if the universe exists, God exists, okay? Or if the universe exists, there's a first cause. Or if the universe exists, a first cause exists. Understanding the universe, of course, to be an effect, it's contingent, it moves, it has to be therefore set into motion at some point. The first cause, which is the conclusion to the argument, that's what we call God. So we're not taking God, defining him in a particular way, and then stuffing him into the argument. That's not what's happening here. And if that's what they think is happening, they've terribly misunderstood the argument, historically and even contemporarily. So these arguments, restarting the argument in terms of things that begin to exist, right? Everything that begins to exist, that's Craig's argument, okay? And it's legitimate, it's valid and sound. Anything that begins to exist must have a cause, right? It doesn't just pop out of non-existence. It doesn't just move from non-being to being without a cause. Okay, so totally. This is just following along with the principle of causality, which I think these authors of whatever this website, whoever these authors are of Rational Wiki have totally misunderstood. They don't even know what the principle of causality is. They need to go back to the philosophical drawing board and get their first principles right before they come here and start criticizing things they don't understand. These arguments are flawed because they conflate the appearance of matter in a certain form, okay, which we know from experience to have a physical explanation. Well, no. See, this is the problem with scientism. Everything has a physical explanation. Well, that's not true. It's simply not true. When look, it's not everything has a physical explanation. Not everything has an empirical scientific explanation. Philosophy, art, all of these things, ethics, none of these things have a physical scientific explanation. And when you try to shove everything into that grid, you're bound to come up with falsehood. You're not going to reach the truth. You're going to come up with falsehood. You're going to come to a place that doesn't make any sense, which is what you've done here. These arguments are flawed because they conflate the appearance of matter and a certain which we know experience to have a physical explanation. Let's do it this way. So, for example, if you have the universe, right? Let's just take the universe as a whole, and the existence of the universe, which we would just define maybe perhaps as being all matter, all space and matter, time, space, and matter. Okay. Matter does not have a physical explanation. That would be like saying matter is matter's explanation. Okay, and which is, if anything's begging the question, that's begging the question. That's circular reasoning. Okay, so what they just said is matter. Hear me clearly. These arguments are flawed because they conflate the appearance of matter in a certain form, which we know from experience to have a physical explanation. In other words, the explanation for the physical is the physical. That is circular reasoning. That is begging the question. Okay, with the existence of matter itself. Okay, so now they've made a dichotomy. They've made a distinction between matter as we experience it and matter as it exists in itself. Okay, this is kind of getting us into Hume's skepticism and then Kant's phenomenological and nomenological realms. Okay, the nomina, we can't know the nomina. We can only know things as we experience it, as we experience those things, which is the phenomenological realm. Okay. And so, okay, fine, I'll play along. With the existence of matter itself, which we have no reason to believe is conditioned on any prior cause or dependent on any prior form. Okay, so eternality of matter. All right. So they're trying to say that matter is eternal, and that's going to be their shtick. That's going to be their argument. The problem with that is that matter can't be eternal because of what matter is. It's contingent by definition. It's dependent by definition. Listen, if something moves, and matter moves, right? Does matter change? Matter changes. Matter moves. It can be changed from one form to another. That means it's contingent. It's dependent. All right? It's dependent. It requires a first cause. It requires a first cause. And it doesn't matter if our current experience tells us that matter can not be destroyed or created. Okay, you have to really jump through a lot of hoops to say that, well, since in our current experience, since we understand scientifically that matter cannot be destroyed, it's just changed and blown up and changed into something else, right? It cannot be destroyed. It therefore means that it never came into existence. It's just always been. Right? That's the eternality of the universe kind of argument. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous because something that's contingent, something that's dependent requires a creator, a first cause, a first sustainer. So these arguments are flawed because they conflate the appearance of matter in a certain form, which we know from experience to have a physical explanation, with the existence of matter itself, which we have no reason to believe is conditioned on any prior cause or dependent on any prior form. A variation called the Kalam cosmological argument is a favorite of notable apologist William Lane Craig. So, guys, obviously this argument is, well, the description of this argument is totally, it's wrong. They need to get it right. And then, therefore, their critique of the argument is going to be wrong because they're throwing stones at a straw man. They're not steel-manning the argument whatsoever. And you can just go through Rational Wiki and find stuff like that all over the place, right? The old everything requires a cause misunderstanding the principle of causality came from John Stuart Mill. At least, maybe it came from Hume, but John Stuart Mill said something to the effect of everything requires a cause. Bertrand Russell republished The Error, and so on and so forth. Now you get atheists that still parrot their favorite heroes and their language and all that. You get these gross mischaracterizations of these arguments. You know what, guys? You who wrote Rational Wiki, go read Thomas Aquinas. Go read his 5 Ways at the beginning of his Summa Contra Gentiles or at the beginning of his Summa Theologica. And get a grasp of it. Get a commentary too, because you're going to you're going to twist Thomas's words around too, and you already have to some extent. Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, if it's beneficial for you at all, I know I'm rusty when it comes to apologetics, but if it was beneficial to you, please let me know by subscribing to my channel, clicking the bell to get continued notifications, and give me a thumbs up if you liked it. If you didn't like it, give me a thumbs down. Be honest. Let me know why. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday.